Marcelle and I decided to gather here back in 1974. We had our parents, our children, including son Kevin, who's here, Alicia and Mark, my sister Mary, and I used the room to announce my candidacy for the United States Senate. At that time, I was a 33-year-old, fourth-term Chittenden County State's Attorney, knowing that Vermont had never sent a Democrat to the United States Senate and certainly had never sent somebody my age. But I felt that I understood the needs and the values of Vermont. I thought it was time for my generation to address them.
I want to be a United States Senator for a number of reasons. I think a lot of it has to do with just what I see as the special qualities of Vermont and Vermonters. Vermont has a history of sending strong voices to the United States Senate, and I think I could be one of those strong voices.
Marcelle and I have reached the conclusion that it is time to put down the gavel. It is time to pass the torch to the next Vermonter who will carry on this work for our great state. It's time to come home.
Patrick Leahy retired on January 3, 2023, as the third longest-serving senator in U.S. history. He was chairman of the Agriculture and Judiciary Committees, and most recently led the powerful Appropriations Committee. He cast a remarkable 17,374 votes, according to his staff, in 48 years in office. Leahy's influence in Washington has given tiny Vermont an outsized voice in national politics and significant financial benefits, too. I'm Jane Lindholm. Join us this hour as we hear from Senator Leahy about what he hopes his legacy will be, both in U.S. politics and Vermont history. We talked with the senator as he was just wrapping up his time in office in two wide-ranging interviews in Washington, D.C., and at his office in Burlington, Vermont. Those who know Patrick Leahy are aware that he's almost always accompanied by his wife, Marcelle, and his camera. Senator, you were born nearly blind, legally blind in one eye, your left eye, right? You only need one eye to look through the viewfinder to take a picture, and in fact, it's a distraction if you're trying to do too much with both eyes. You need to have that narrow focus. Do you think that blindness actually maybe led you into a path of photography or helped you see things in a different way?
I find that when I'm taking pictures, I just go into that world and I see what I want to remember. I mean, I've got some of these are just memories that...
Well, yes, it's your point of view. It is the actual view that you had on history, but it also doesn't then include you in the frame. And you were in these places. You were part of all of this history.
Everybody says, well, Pat, you're not going to be in the picture. I said, I want to get the picture. I've seen too many of my colleagues in both parties that we got to be in the picture. I want to take the picture. Well, the thing is, I've been at many bill signings. I'm the only person who's had those pictures because all the photographers are in front. Members of Congress are there trying to get in the picture. I step back, I'm taking a picture of the president's hand, signing it. And several former presidents have those in their libraries now.
Well, I wanted to know if there are certain moments that stick out in your career that you can actually look at, that you point to, that you've taken photos of, or that you have pictures that speak to you about the longevity of your career and the legacy that you have in Vermont.
But these are things that people wouldn't see. Mm-hmm. You got all the formal pictures of the White House and everything else. That's something. This one especially. I was down in refugee camp in El Salvador during the Contra Wars. And I went in there with my camera. I asked everybody through a translator if I could take their pictures. And this man stepped forward, and he just looked at me. A copy that's hung over my desk ever since. This man is saying to me, I'm powerless. I have no money. I can never do anything to help somebody like you. What do you do to help people like me?
And this is specifically the one that you call your conscience.
That's my conscience photo. So this man was sitting there. You see the little stools? He'd been hopping on those for years since he was injured.
And lost his legs.
And lost his legs from an American landmine. And he said, and most of the time he'd been kind of staring at me. And I said, God, this man must hate me. I started to feel guilty even though we were trying to help him. And they said, would you pick him up and put him in the wheelchair? Marcelle, who was, a medical surgical nurse, she tells me how to pick him up so I don't hurt him. I pick him up, I put him in the wheelchair. I started to get up and he grabbed my shirt and he pulled me down and he kissed me. Something like that, you don't forget.
There's a thin line between feeling that this is a conscience photo for you because this is an important reminder that your job is to help people who are helpless.
Which I learned here in Vermont because we have so many who are helpless in Vermont.
That's right, so many people who don't have power. But there's also a poverty tourism or a feeling of importance because you have the power to help. So how do you walk the line between realizing that your job is to help those who don't have the power and feeling like, look at me, I'm the big American.
I don't feel that way. It's not a sense of power. I feel it as more, I've been given this opportunity. And we've always tried to help people even though I was growing up, but now I have an opportunity to do it at a higher scale. And things that go with the Senate and the nice offices and everything else, or you can put your jeans and a t-shirt on and go out and see the people that are suffering and do something for them.
Senator Shelby, thank you very much for talking with us today. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you'd characterize your relationship with Senator Leahy?
Well, it's a personal relationship. Our wives are friends. They know each other pretty well. We're different politically. I'm a Republican. They'd say conservative Republican, and he's a liberal Democrat. But we've worked on the Appropriations Committee. I've been chairman of the committee, and he'd be the vice chairman, and vice versa. But we work to try to put America first. I think Pat Leahy has that in his bones. Leahy-Shelby relationship in the Appropriations Committee is an example of bipartisanship working sometimes, not all the time. And I think we need more and more of that to put our differences aside and say, what is needed in America? What is best for this country? And we've tried to do this.
How would you characterize your relationship with Senator Leahy?
I adore the man.
Why?
He's extremely impressive at his job, perhaps as good as there's ever been. And he also looked out for me when I was the new kid on the block. So that's a pretty good combo right there. I've learned a lot from him just by watching him.
Like what in particular?
Well, he's particularly good at being a chairman, which is a fairly unique skill set, but 48 years gives you a lot of opportunities to be a chairman, and he's been a very effective one for a long time. He can command a hearing room like very few other people. When he dials up the big voice. He immediately takes over the room. He can also be extremely deft at navigating the sensibilities in the room with the right word in the right way, so that he makes his point extremely effectively with sort of surgical precision.
Thank you for joining the Department of Defense in recognizing the public service and contributions to the United States Armed Forces during the 4+ decades that Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont and Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama have served the United States Congress. In a few moments, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Staff, and each service will present the Distinguished Public Service Award to Senator Leahy and Senator Shelby. This award is the highest honor that can be presented by the Department of Defense to a private citizen.
I want to speak on behalf of the Joint Force, 2.1 million of us in uniform, active duty, Guard, Reserve, all their families, another several million, all the veterans that are out there, 44 years of service in the Senate. They are unbelievably committed. They are men of incredible integrity. And their character is absolutely beyond reproach. And one of the things that I think that stands out amongst both of you is your ability to work together in a bipartisan way to get things done for the nation.
Thank you very much for hosting us here today in your office. I appreciate talking with you.
I've been looking forward to it.
One of your first votes, and certainly the first vote that put you in the forefront of American politics, was your vote in 1975 against continuing funding for the Vietnam War. And your vote at that time was not only going against your party's wishes, but it went against the feelings of many Vermonters at the time who still supported the Vietnam War.
The editor of one, at that time, our largest newspaper, said that I would never be reelected. Nobody from Vermont or the area had ever voted to end it. I'd be in a minority of one, and they'd make sure I didn't get reelected. And that was 48 years ago. But I felt that's why I should vote. It was highlighted a little bit more because it was by a 1-vote margin. Had I voted the other way, we would have continued the authorization. One very conservative Democrat, actually an independent, who had always voted for money for Vietnam, joined in the vote with me. The chair, after glaring at me, turned to him and said, "Did you really mean to vote no?" And I'll never forget what he said. "I voted no. They've lied to me long enough." The chair said, "You best get the president on the line. He'll have to know the war's over."
It was a powerful vote at an early point in your career, and I suspect that you've reflected on that vote moving through other challenging votes.
I knew it could cost me the seat in the Senate. I was never supposed to be elected anyway. The poll the weekend before, we still got the headline, "Poll Dooms Leahy." I was supposedly 35 points behind, and I won. And I thought, why would you want to be in the Senate if the only thing you can think of is getting reelected? This was one I knew. In fact, I had thought at the time that it would cost me the election. It's also why I've done so much with the Leahy War Victims Fund in Vietnam, where I've helped bring the countries together.
Well, that has been important to you, clearly. It's
Yeah.
been something that you've been passionate about, working to support victims of landmines in particular. You also did not support the war in Iraq. You were in support of the ending of our military occupation in Afghanistan. You have worked in other ways with victims of war, and you've criticized the military budget and bloated spending over the years, and have called for a reprioritization of how the military allocates funding to be more strategic in American defense. Your support of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter seemed like an aberration to some Vermonters, and in fact felt like a betrayal to some Vermonters who saw you as an advocate for people who would be impacted unfairly as civilians. How do you react to Vermonters who felt betrayed by you on that, who thought they knew something about you and felt like this was not in character with what they thought, how they thought you would vote or how they thought you would support them for vulnerable communities affected by the noise?
I wish they'd come and talk to me about it. I went over and over on it. I've been a supporter of the National Guard. I'm a supporter of the Army National Guard. I want Vermont to have a good National Guard, especially because its ratings have always been among the highest in the whole country. I think the three of us in the delegation felt it would help maintain that rating with the F-35. The cost overruns are not acceptable, and I made it very clear they're not going to have my vote on funding if that continues.
A different archivist was working for Senator Leahy from 2019 until actually just a few weeks ago. He's actually a really good example of what to do, but a lot of senators don't have any archivists at all, so busy. The quote I was given from the packing company is that all of his stuff, including pieces of furniture, will be 610 cubic feet of material. But I mean, he's been in office forever, so. It is daunting. A lot of the stuff that's still on the walls are going to be given to staff as gifts, but there's also stuff that like still has to be added to the database and everything. So these are the boxes that we know are going to UVM. So it's like all of these, and then I have even more in my office. We had 225 white record boxes just like all over the place. Yeah, so this was my office with all these like boxes. Just boxes and boxes and boxes. We're gonna have to get someone to unscrew the Vermont sign on the door because that's such like a special thing. Like no one else has that on their door or anything like that. Yeah, that definitely has to go to the archive.
Let me shift gears a little bit and talk about agriculture and food. You have worked for a long time in your career on issues that are important to agriculture for Vermont farmers and Vermont communities as well as for the nation. And we can look to legislation that you've worked on when it comes to organic standards, organic labeling, GMO labeling, which you defended. You've also worked on farm-to-table initiatives, particularly as they relate to farm-to-school, to get access for school kids.
I want a school kid to know what real food tastes like, not what's in a package on the...
Yes, and that provides an economic avenue of support for farmers and for agricultural producers. You've also been a supporter of supplemental food programs, WIC and SNAP, for example, that help make sure that people have access to food when they don't necessarily have the money to support it. However, as you're retiring, we're looking at increasing inflation, huge inflation in grocery bills and costs, which affect even Americans who previously felt secure in their ability to feed their families. And a new study in Vermont that shows 2 in 5 Vermonters do not feel like they have the ability to cover their food needs at any given time right now. This is not a problem that has been fixed despite your work and others' work on food issues. And I wonder, as you're leaving, what you think would work to make sure that everybody can at least feed themselves and their families.
When I wrote the Organic Farm Bill, organic farmers in Vermont were having a difficult time following standards because it'd be undercut by people who wouldn't and call it organic. We changed that. That kept a lot of farmers employed, a lot of Vermonters employed, good food employed. We should continue that. The price of food, especially in the big conglomerates, I think they're raising it far too much. But all of these inflationary things are hurting the average working person. I can bring and have brought far more money to Vermont than anybody in history. But then it's got to be invested correctly. We've got to do things to bring decent paying jobs into Vermont because things are costing more. And I think everybody has to try to find ways of attacking that. Food worries me. If it's big food companies, their profits, some of them, their profits have become obscene, and their packaging has become smaller at the same time. That's got to stop.
So beyond inflationary pressures, you think big food companies are actually tacking on higher costs than they need to?
I think they are. I mean, a lot of these companies are, but there's no magic way. I started a program so you could use food stamps at farmers markets. Mm-hmm. That made a big difference in the number of farms that could employ people in Vermont.
And people's access to fresh fruit and vegetables.
That's why Marcelle and I will go around to a lot of the school lunch programs and have lunch with the kids. Not because I'm getting a vote from a 10 or 11-year-old, but say, what do you like about the food? Some food they look at, they don't try it. Some vegetables. So Marcelle and I always put it on our plate and they, what? Oh, this is really good. I said, yes. But no, there's no easy answer. I worry that inflationary costs are especially hard on a small state like ours. It's one of the reasons I brought millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to Vermont on programs that might help employ people.
And yet 2 in 5, almost half of all Vermonters can't afford their own food right now.
Which in the wealthiest, most powerful nation on earth, to have people go hungry makes no sense. I say if we can build more battleships, we can feed more people.
So we thought we'd ask, what it feels like as you start to get adjusted to what it's going to be like to move over from the House to the Senate.
Well, a lot of it has to do with Senator Leahy. There's a certain amount of humility I have on this because it's rare in public life that somebody serves so long, so well, 48 years. And so for so many Vermonters, me included, I think for all of us, two things. One, he's been a constant in our life in Vermont for so many Vermonters. And number two, as you get older and you appreciate that we all make our mistakes, we all have our lumps, but there's some people who somehow manage to maintain their integrity, their sense of commitment, their deep appreciation for Vermonters, and that's Patrick. His is a Senate life well lived. So it's really kind of, as a Vermonter, I'm proud to be witnessing the appreciation and affection that folks have for Patrick and Marcelle. Well, you've been to his Hideaway?
Yeah.
The
Did
Hideaway
we go to
is
the Hideaway?
the Hideaway
We
is
didn't go to the Hideaway.
Well, you want to go to the Hideaway if you can. The Hideaway has the Hideaway is a misnomer because it's like, you know.
And yet you don't even have lights yet in your transitional office.
That's true. That's true. I'm going to do something. But Patrick's got a beautiful view of the mall, and he'll miss that.
Could you tell us a little bit about what this means to you today to have Bishop Coyne here and to be doing this?
It means a lot. I've had the opportunity to invite people here before, my late brother-in-law and the bishop, and those are two very meaningful things for me.
The senator and his staff have been incredibly helpful to the people of Vermont, but also to our Catholic Church because of immigration issues. And we've had a lot of issues with getting some seminarians in from Vietnam and getting our priests in from Philippines and India. And his office has really helped a lot for us and been stepped up. And they've also helped us with some other people that are dealing with immigration issues. So I'm very thankful, and I want to thank him for all that. We have our disagreements on other things, but.
When you talk about your differences, do you discuss political differences like marriage and his support for same-sex marriage?
We talk about it, but it's more just kind of coming to a common understanding of our positions. I understand clearly the senator's position, he understands mine, and try and accommodate each other and find a way that we can continue to dialogue. I think I want to be an example to others of how we need to just reach across those things that divide us in time and see the good works that we can do in common in spite of the differences. And I think the senator does as well.
I'm hoping that you could take us back to 1996 and your vote in favor of the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA. By 2011, you were voting in support of same-sex marriage, and a lot had changed in those 15 years in between. And I'm curious if, before we talk about your support for same-sex marriage, if you could take us to 1996 and what you were thinking.
Well, I was worried that they had tucked a couple things in there. I was fine with same-sex marriage. I had problems the way the one was written here, and I was afraid of how it might affect Vermont. In retrospect, I think I probably should have worked harder to get an amendment to clarify it, but then it might not have passed. I've always favored same-sex marriage. We have a number of people through the years in my office. Marcelle and I have attended their marriage, same-sex marriages. I've defended it on the floor. I outpassed the recent bill.
When you say you've always supported same-sex marriage, that's not something a lot of Americans can say of your age. This is something that has changed in American culture pretty rapidly when it comes to when we think about civil rights.
It has, but Marcelle and I grew up with friends who were in same-sex relationship, and we've always just said, that's fine. That's not who we are. That's who you are, and you're good people, and we're glad to have you as friends.
Yesterday, you were joined by Vermont's Catholic Bishop, Bishop Coyne, to give the opening prayer in the Senate. And your Catholic faith is something that you have talked about over the years. The Catholic Church, of course, officially does not sanction or support gay marriage, same-sex marriage. When you think about where and how your faith guides you, and where and how you diverge from official church doctrine, how do you think about those two things when they are in conflict?
I have one faith. It's my oath of office.
So your faith and what you see as your oath of office or your oath to law, that rises above your religious
Also,
convictions.
my feeling that especially a male hierarchy to make choices for women is wrong. We don't have to defend marriage. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary. But we both defend the right for women to make the choices they want. If it's a gay couple, male or female, it's their choice. It's not ours. Now, if they want to set up a bank robbery chain or something like that, then I think steps should be taken. But on personal matters, that should be a person's choice, not the government's.
As you're leaving office, the right to access to an abortion is a big topic in American culture and in Washington. Access to practicing your own religion is something that is sometimes debated in American culture. Marriage rights and equality, voting rights, so many civil rights issues that are still not fully legalized or fully actualized in American culture.
And the John Lewis Act on voting rights, I'm the chief sponsor. Don't you think everybody should be able to vote? I've even done ads when we've changed the time of primaries, urging everybody to vote, Republican or Democrat, and I said so. I did say, in one of these ads, Marcelle and I were talking, I turned to her and I said, but I hope you vote for me. She said, do I get a bumper sticker? We didn't realize the camera was still going. She said, it was a joke. All over the state, people we never met would come up to her and say, did you get your bumper sticker?
And did she? Did you have bumper stickers?
She did.
I think he would be a very conscientious, sympathetic senator. I'm glad that he's doing it. It's kind of frightening because either way, it's going to make a big change in our lives.
See her.
Oh, I thought you were inside.
So this is your interview, darling. I'm just here to go, oh
I'm much more
God,
comfortable when he's being the one being interviewed.
You probably already know this, but the Vermont Press Corps has a game that we play when we interview your husband. And we keep track of how many times he talks about his early career as a prosecutor, how many times he mentions the farm in Middlesex, and the one that you know will have the most mentions is how many times he mentions Marcelle.
I have heard that, yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's kind of nice. When he first started in politics, it was not easy for me at all. We were both pretty unprepared. And sometimes I would hang back and he would literally reach back and pull me along, and not because I was unwilling, it was more that I was uncertain. Sometimes it wasn't even the hand. I could just feel him pulling me and including me in things. And it's been really nice because it's given me such an opportunity to experience things that I never would have otherwise. It's been very special.
Did you have career aspirations that you were not able to recognize because of Senator Leahy's job, but that you were able to substitute with fulfillment in other ways?
I had 3 wishes as a young woman, as a teenager, and it was that I wanted to be a nurse. I did it. And I didn't work as long as I might have, but I did work a fair amount. And I wanted to have a happy marriage.
Okay.
And I wanted to have children. And I think that's a pretty successful life. I got 100 out of 100.
Yeah, that is pretty successful. Not everybody gets all 3 of those wishes.
Yes. I'm sorry. It's just,
Okay, darling. Let me leave.
it's, no, it's been a really tough week. Not tough, but emotional.
Why?
Well, we're saying goodbye to a lot of people and a lot of things.
What does that mean to you that so many people are appreciating the time that both of you have spent here and the work that Senator Leahy has done?
Oh, we've been together, and I've been at Patrick's side for so many of the things that he's worked so hard on, and fortunately, for most of them, he's achieved.
What influence do you think you have had on decisions Patrick Leahy has made over the years? Where do we see your influence?
I don't know. I think.
What do you think?
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
You were there every step of the way with me. You were there when we were getting the prosthetics for the people who had lost limbs. You were there visiting the people who had been injured and those whose children inherited the disaster of Agent Orange. And they were talking about all the way through. You were there helping them into a wheelchair, helping children who couldn't walk otherwise. And we did that together.
But you see, this is my point exactly.
They raised
He
it.
gives me more credit than I think I really deserve, because you were the one that did this. I feel I accompanied you.
You're the one
accompanied
that went
him.
in the operating rooms and all, and I stayed outside.
Yeah.
Does everybody in the Senate know Marcelle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She's very outgoing, and she's very, she travels with him, and she's sort of unmistakably his better half. That's really pretty impressive when you think how long they've been married. But they're still like a couple of high school seniors have a crush on each other.
What do you think he's going to miss most?
Colleagues.
Some of them.
There's always a couple of live ones in every group, but I think generally Patrick is extremely gregarious. He loves the senators. He looks out for his colleagues.
When you say he was a mentor when you first came here, what does mentorship look like? Or what does somebody helping to show you around and get you acquainted look like in the Senate?
Well, sometimes it's just like taking you to his magnificent hideaway to partake of holy water, to use his phrase, and feeling that you're included with the cool kids. Sometimes the conversations veer a little bit more philosophically, and very often it's about the history of the Senate and Patrick imparting 48 years of experience and stories and learning and legend that help you understand the institution.
I want to switch gears completely and ask you a little bit about your Hideaway office, because as we've moved around the Capitol here, we keep hearing from people who, as much as they're going to miss you, Senator, may miss the jovial social visits in your Hideaway office with what you call holy water. So I wonder if you're going to miss that as much as they will.
Well, I'll miss the camaraderie. The view is spectacular. You look down the mall, the balcony out there. I invite senators of both parties to come down. We're having an evening session. You got this beautiful sunset views from it. I invite them down for holy water and prayer hour. And one senator said, well, holy water prayer hour, I'm not sure that works with my religion. And he said, well, Pat's got 12-year-old holy water. He's got single water. He said, that fits my religion. I'll be there. But when we get there, we start talking, we find it's not just the political issues where maybe division. We talk about what our children might be doing at school, or what it was like growing up, many of them in very difficult circumstances, what people feel like in their state. And then we'll say, on this thing that we're hung up on, what if we gave a little and you gave a little, and we'd work out agreements sometimes on legislation nobody thought could be done. I've passed more bipartisan legislation, the last study showed, than any other senator. But you've got to take time and talk with them. Not just, well, section 1, 2, 3 is better than section 4, 5, 6. Rather, how will this affect your state? And if we change this, would it be better for your state and still protect my state? And we usually find ways.
Vermonters certainly know what he has contributed to our state in many ways, and what, just by virtue of his seniority in some cases, what he's been able to bring to our small state. And as a fellow small state senator, that's important to small states, and some of the ways that a rural state has been able to benefit, even through COVID policies, through his advocacy. Beyond Vermont, what do you think his legacy is?
A lot of his legacy is going to be in judiciary and having stood up and spoken up for civil rights in incredibly powerful ways. I think as an early supporter of President Obama, he made a measurable difference in making President Obama's presidency a real prospect, and I think that's something of a legacy. And I've traveled with him overseas, and the guy's worshipped in Vietnam in particular, where his work on unexploded ordnance and on Agent Orange and on cleaning up our old facilities has made him a real national hero. So it depends on where you go, but he leaves a lot of legacy.
When you look at this, when you see your name there, and that's going to be pried off in a couple of weeks, what do you think about? When you touch that panel.
I think how fortunate I am to have had the opportunity. You grow up in a small city in Vermont. I thought it'd be quite a career to have been state's attorney. Mm-hmm. And I think of when I was the most junior member in this committee, no, I never thought I'd be here. And I think what a privilege it is. And I'm also feel so privileged that I could be here where I could make up my mind, as I did a few years ago, that this would be my last term. And I can look back over well over 17,000 votes, and I could say, yeah, there's something, in retrospect, I'd do differently. And I took comfort during the times thinking the issue will come up again. But the key issues on war, on impeachment, on things like that, that comes up once. Yeah. And I thought it through very, very carefully. Did not want to make a mistake. But Marcelle and I talked about this after the last election. I want to be able to do the most I can right up to the very end, and I am. Mm-hmm. So I feel good about that. After I announced, it was over a year ago, that I wasn't going to run again, somebody asked me, well, do you have any doubts on your decision? I said, absolutely none. Marcelle and I thought it through very carefully, and I knew that's what I wanted.
You're nearing a half century of work in the Senate and a longer career as a politician and a powerful person in Vermont. But as the years go on, people's legacies get distilled down to one or two things. There's so much in Vermont that bears your name or bears your thumbprints, bears your legacy. But in 50 or 100 years, what do you think the power of your legacy is still going to be?
I hope it would be that I was honest. I followed true Vermont values, the values I saw as an adult, and saw the bad things fade away. and that I set a standard by which others could. I want people to see that as a way things could be done. That I showed how we cannot become an island. We are connected to the rest of the world. I don't want to be known for any one of them. I want to be known that I helped strengthen the environmental community, just as I have the nutrition community. And but if there's any one thing that I was willing to stand up for principle, when I cast, after only 3 months in, when I was told nobody from Vermont's ever voted to stop the war. We certainly had members of Congress from Vermont who pointed out what was wrong with it, but never voted to stop it, and told me I was going to be a one-term senator because of that. And I hope people remember me as saying, then that's what I'll be, because it's so important to stop it.
Do you have any regrets?
No, I mean, I had some great opportunities in here. We had one president wanted to nominate me to the U.S. Supreme Court. He writes about it in his own book, his biography. I said, no, I don't want to be in the judicial monastery. I've obviously been offered a number of jobs that would pay a lot more in the Senate, be a lot less work, but it's not what I want to do. I felt a real opportunity to represent our native state, mine and Marcelle's, in the Senate, and have the opportunity to reach out to anything I wanted. And I remember as a young law student at Georgetown, walk up to the Capitol, look at the Senate and say, man, what a job. I'll never be there, but what a job. But once I got in the Senate, I knew whether I'm there for 6 years or possibly 12 years. It was inconceivable it'd be 48 years. I thought this place gives me the opportunity to be involved in anything I want. I can do more for Vermont than anybody's been able to. In the last COVID bill, and brought an extra $1.5 billion or so to Vermont for it. But when I go into some of these small towns and they say, look what we did in our school. Look at the program that you helped start. And here's these kids. I mean, we had them all out one time singing to Marcelle and myself. I think, you know, where else would I be able to do something like this and still come home to a state where you walk down the street and have people call you by your first name and say, I saw your cousin yesterday or something like that. So no, I've never had any regrets. Glad to be there. And we started making up our mind about 3 years ago, and pretty well made up our mind this is the time to leave. I love being able to announce I was leaving the same room in the State House where I announced as a 33-year-old that I was going to run. Yeah, okay, kid, have fun. They don't call me kid anymore, but but no, the Senate can be a wonderful stepping stone for other things. I was just happy to be in the Senate.
Why didn't you ever run for president?
Oh, God, no. Because we weren't going to elect anybody from the state. I was not going to. I had far more independence doing what I do. I've known a number of presidents very well. I've enjoyed working with them. I enjoyed the fact I pick up the phone, call them privately, be heard. But no. If I was going to run for president, I'd leave the Senate to do it, because you can't run for president and do your work in the Senate at the same time.
As you think about the Senate now, you write in your autobiography that, you know, there's this idea of the Senate as the conscience of the nation, and you felt like it was when you got started. You hope it can get back there, but you don't think it's the conscience of the nation now, or is it still?
I am very worried. I'm very worried about the direction of the Senate, certainly very worried about the Supreme Court. And I'm the only person who can talk about 48 years. I mean, only two people served longer than I did in the history of the country, and they died in office.
Why didn't you want to keep going until you died in office?
Well, yeah, I knew I could get reelected. I had strong support from both parties. But I'm 82. Marcelle and I need more time for ourselves because everything I did, she was helpful. She would pitch in. She'd be a chief volunteer. We needed some time.
All the way through, we've always said we want to go back home to Vermont. So that's really nice too. I can't wait to be back home in Vermont.
We look, even now, we'll look at pictures and we'll say, remember that? Wasn't that great? It might be like the picture of the two of us scuba diving here. It might be also just a picture walking across the fields of our farm in Middlesex.
Yeah. And spend time with our friends too, with our
That's the other
friends
thing.
and our family. That's part of the savoring, things that we didn't have the time to
To
do.
have time. Time is the most important.
Patrick said scuba diving. Are you up for that?
She's the one that started it.
Yeah, I did.
Well, thank you both. Congratulations on a long tenure here. It takes a lot of fortitude, and I appreciate you talking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're privileged to have had the opportunity. Yes. But we're homesick, and we can't wait to get back to Vermont all the time.